For over 30 years, the Household Food Security Report was the country's main tool for tracking hunger trends. It was more than just a survey. It asked households across America very specific questions, like whether they ever worried about running out of food or if they had skipped meals because there wasn't enough money. The answers gave policymakers and researchers a way to measure food insecurity at the national level and to see how that changed year after year. These insights weren't just academic, they were used to shape policies that determined how much funding went to nutrition programs like SNAP, WIC, and free or reduced price school lunches. The report offered continuity, a historical record stretching back decades, making it possible to compare the hunger levels of today against those in the past. This consistency is why the report became so important. Without it, there would be no way to track long-term patterns of hunger in a standardized way. During the Great Recession in 2008 and the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, this report showed spikes in food insecurity that matched the economic hardships families were facing. It told a story that raw spending numbers alone could not explain, whether extra dollars in SNAP or emergency allotments actually reached families in need. That's why ending it now feels like tearing out a vital chapter from the nation's food security record. The report wasn't perfect, but it gave Americans a transparent look at the reality of hunger in their communities. The USDA shocked many when it announced that the 2024 edition of the Household Food Security Report, scheduled for release on October 22nd, would be the final one. The agency explained that the report was redundant, costly, and too politicized to be useful. According to USDA officials, the survey overlapped with other government data collections like the Census Bureau's Current Population Survey and the American Community Survey, which also include questions about poverty and food access. They also argued that maintaining the survey was expensive and required resources that could be redirected to what they call core statutory requirements. In short, they believe the money could be better spent elsewhere. Another argument the USDA put forward was that the survey itself was flawed. They claimed the questions were too subjective, relying on households to self-report about food insecurity, which could lead to inconsistencies or bias in the results. They also argued that the data was too often used to fearmonger about hunger levels, especially when overall federal food assistance spending was at record highs. USDA leaders maintain that newer, real-time surveys like the Household Pulse Survey during COVID-19 provide more accurate and up-to-date information. Their stance is clear. It's time to move away from this older tool and rely on modern methods of collecting food security data. One of the biggest points USDA emphasized was the sharp rise in SNAP spending over the last few years. Between 2019 and 2023, federal spending on food stamps surged by nearly 87%. This wasn't because more families suddenly signed up without reason. It was a result of pandemic-era emergency allotments, expansions to eligibility rules, and temporary boosts in the maximum benefits families could receive. The federal government poured billions into food assistance to help people weather job losses, school closures, and skyrocketing grocery prices. Despite this massive increase in spending, USDA officials point out that food insecurity levels didn't show significant declines. Roughly 10 to 13% of American households reported food insecurity during those years, similar to pre-pandemic levels. To USDA, this suggests that the report wasn't giving them useful enough insights, especially considering the huge investment in benefits. They argue that other data sets can track hunger more efficiently, without maintaining a decades-old survey system. But critics say this interpretation misses the bigger picture, that without the emergency allotments, hunger would have been far worse, and the report showed exactly how crucial those benefits were to keeping families afloat. Critics are sounding the alarm not just about the decision itself, but about its timing. The end of the report comes right after major cuts to SNAP benefits rolled out, particularly under the Trump administration's push to scale back pandemic-era aid. Advocates argue that this isn't just a coincidence, that removing the main tool for measuring hunger right after cutting benefits looks like an attempt to hide the impact of those cuts. If hunger increases in the coming years, the data to prove it may no longer exist in the same trusted format. Lawmakers and economists have been quick to criticize the USDA. Representative Mike Levin called the move inexcusable and dangerous, pointing out that millions of families are still struggling with high grocery costs and inflation. Economist Justin Wolfers put it more bluntly, saying the decision feels like a deliberate attempt to stop measuring hunger so that policymakers can claim SNAP cuts aren't hurting families. His viral post summed it up in 3 steps. First, cut food assistance, then stop tracking hunger, and finally argue there's no evidence of harm. It's this sense of political maneuvering that has fueled so much backlash against USDA's announcement. Even if USDA's arguments about redundancy and cost carry some weight, critics argue that the way this was handled undermines transparency. Rather than gradually phasing out the Household Food Security Report or replacing it with a stronger survey, the agency abruptly canceled a data source that has been the backbone of food insecurity research for decades. That sudden decision strips away a critical tool at a time when families are facing higher grocery prices, the end of pandemic benefits, and uncertainty about future aid. Without consistent, nationally recognized reporting, it becomes much harder for the public, the media, and Congress to hold policymakers accountable for the real impact of benefit changes. The bigger issue here is trust. Data collection in a democracy isn't just about numbers. It's about showing citizens the truth, even when the results are uncomfortable. By pulling the plug on this long-running survey, USDA gives the impression that it doesn't want to know, or doesn't want us to know, how many Americans are going hungry. That's why the decision has been labeled dangerous by advocates. Not because surveys can't be improved, but because stopping them altogether takes away the transparency that ensures government actions are based on facts, not political convenience. Some argue that even without USDA's report, other organizations will continue to measure food insecurity, but none have the same reach, credibility, or long-term record. Feeding America, one of the largest hunger relief organizations in the U.S., runs its own national survey, and the results are sobering. In their most recent report, 52% of households said they ran out of food at least once in the past year, while 28% reported the same problem in just the last month. This shows that hunger is not only widespread, but also happening in real time. Their survey also revealed that 80% of families had to buy cheaper, less nutritious food, while more than half said they delayed paying rent, utilities, or even medical bills just to keep food on the table. While these surveys shine a light on the seriousness of the crisis, they don't have the same weight as USDA's data when it comes to influencing federal policy. Independent groups lack the authority and the decades of historical data that made the government report so valuable. Universities and state agencies may step in to expand their own surveys, but without a central, nationally recognized measure, the picture of hunger in America will become fragmented. That means advocates may have to fight even harder to prove the reality of food insecurity to lawmakers, who may dismiss these outside surveys as biased or incomplete. For seniors and low-income families, the timing of this decision couldn't be worse. Food insecurity hits hardest among people living on fixed incomes like Social Security retirees, SSI and SSDI recipients, and low-wage workers who don't have much wiggle room in their budgets. Older adults often face the impossible choice of whether to buy groceries, pay for prescriptions, or keep the lights on. Without strong, transparent national data, it will be far more difficult to highlight just how badly these households are being affected by rising food costs and reduced benefits. In fact, seniors have some of the highest rates of food insecurity with hunger, meaning they're not just worried about food, but actually skipping meals to get by. Another overlooked group is rural families, who often face higher food prices due to transportation costs and have fewer grocery stores nearby. Add in disabled individuals, who may rely heavily on both Social Security and SNAP, and you have millions of Americans whose struggles could be pushed further into the shadows without this report. When the data disappears, so does visibility, and policymakers lose the evidence they need to justify additional funding or expanded programs. For seniors, children, rural families, and people with disabilities, this isn't just about a canceled survey. It's about losing the ability to be seen in the statistics that drive decisions in Washington. So what can ordinary people do in response to this? First, it's important to make your voice heard. Contact your senators and representatives and tell them that ending the Household Food Security Report is unacceptable at a time when hunger is still widespread. Lawmakers need to hear directly from the people who are living this reality every day. If you've noticed your SNAP benefits shrinking, or if you've had to stretch your food budget by skipping meals, those stories matter. When Congress gets flooded with calls, letters, and emails, it becomes harder for them to ignore the consequences of these decisions. Transparency in data is not just an academic issue. It's about making sure that real families don't get swept under the rug. At the same time, don't forget about local resources that can help you and your neighbors right now. Feeding America has a Find Your Local Food Bank tool that connects families to nearby food pantries and meal programs. Community organizations, churches, and even online support groups often share tips and resources for stretching food budgets and finding free food opportunities. While we push for accountability at the national level, we also need to support each other locally to make sure no one goes hungry. Together, advocacy and community action can help fill the gaps left behind by USDA's decision. Even if it won't completely replace the data we've lost, the bottom line is this: the USDA claims the Household Food Security Report has outlived its usefulness, but critics believe its sudden end is more about politics than efficiency. Without this data, it will be harder to prove when hunger rises, especially after cuts to SNAP and other safety net programs. Seniors, disabled individuals, children, and rural families could become invisible in the official record, and that makes it much easier for Washington to ignore their struggles. This isn't just a fight over surveys and statistics. It's a fight over whether we're willing to face the truth about hunger in America. So I want to hear from you. Do you believe USDA is saving money, or do you think this is about covering up the impact of SNAP cuts? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with others who need to know, and subscribe to Social Security Post so you don't miss any updates about Social Security, SNAP, Medicare, Medicaid, and other benefits that impact your daily life. I'll be back soon with more information on what's changing in these programs and how it could affect you. Until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and take care of each other.